No one suspects that the place where one seeks rest may actually be the main source of spiritual restlessness. It's easy to point out distractions in the outside world, but few have the courage to face those that live inside their own room. And even when everything seems peaceful, there is a silent noise that disturbs the soul. It is the small permissions that, little by little, make room for inner chaos. Spiritual life is not shaken only by great sins or obvious scandals. It is often corroded by what is tolerated. The bedroom, a place of intimacy and recollection, is also strategic territory in the invisible battle of faith. It contains not only belongings, but memories, distractions, habits and influences that shape, day after day, the condition of the heart. It is in this environment, so familiar, that subtle traps can be hidden. A seemingly harmless decoration, a device running until the wee hours of the morning, a cultural symbol maintained by tradition, all of this can become spiritual noise. The Apostle Paul already warned about this in 1 Thessalonians 5 verse 22, abstain from every appearance of evil. Many wonder why they feel anxiety even when lying down. Why sleep isn't restorative, or why prayers don't seem to reach the ceiling. They rarely consider that the room, full of visual and spiritual distractions, may be stifling the presence of God. After all, you can't hear a whisper when there's turmoil in the room. If this content has spoken to your heart so far, don't hesitate to support this project with a like, a comment or subscribing so you don't miss the next chapters. Your presence here strengthens this journey of faith. One of the most common elements in modern bedrooms is the constant presence of technology. Screens that light up the dawn, notifications that interrupt thoughts and content that divert attention from what really matters. Jesus declared in Matthew 6 verses 22 to 23, "If your eyes are good, your whole body will have light. But what enters your eyes when the last image of the day is a feed of distractions?" The biblical promise of rest comes with a clear condition: trust and rest in God. Psalm 4 verse 8 says, "I lie down in peace and then fall asleep, because, Lord, you alone make me live in safety." This verse does not suit an environment saturated with electronic stimuli, accelerated thoughts and content that generates restlessness. The point is not to demonize technology, but to recognize its place. When entertainment takes the space of meditation, prayer and silence, something needs to be realigned. Jesus himself, in Mark 1 verse 35, removed himself from the hustle and bustle to pray in solitary places. If the Son of God prioritized stillness, what justifies our tolerance of constant noise? In addition to the screens, there are other elements that are as common as they are dangerous: decorations with occult symbolism, images that inspire vanity or sensuality, objects inherited from dubious spiritual contexts. In Deuteronomy 7 verse 26, it is written, "You shall not bring an abomination into your house, lest you be cursed like it." Not all ornaments are just decorative, some carry meanings that conflict with the Christian faith. The danger lies in normalization. Certain things are accepted because they are beautiful, modern or sentimental. But the Bible calls for a radical position. Philippians 4 verse 8 offers a clear criterion: whatever is true, whatever is pure, whatever is lovely, think about these things. And, by extension, in this we must also dwell. Certain objects, even without negative intentions, can become channels of paralyzing memories. Photos, letters, gifts that connect the present with wounds from the past have the power to imprison emotionally and spiritually. Isaiah 43 verse 18 advises, "Do not remember the former things, nor consider the former things." When it comes to life with God, not everything that is lawful is appropriate. It takes spiritual discernment to recognize what needs to be removed. Just as the prophet Elisha cleaned the widow's house before the oil miracle, 2 Kings 4, there are situations in which the miracle will only come after the environment has been purified. Many resist this analysis for fear of appearing fanatical or radical. But what is at stake is not reputation, but communion. In Hebrews 12 verse 1 there is a clear call: letting go of every burden and of the sin that tenaciously besets us. Not all weight is a sin, but all weight delays. The environment you sleep in shapes the thoughts you wake up with. The first look in the morning and the last look at night directly influence the state of the soul. If the room is a minefield of distractions and influences contrary to faith, how can we expect profound spiritual fruits? Consecrating this space is more than an aesthetic decision, it is a spiritual positioning. Just as the Old Testament altars were erected in specific places for encounters with God, the bedroom can also become this invisible altar. All it takes is courage to remove what hinders and faith to maintain what builds. Not every spiritual enemy presents itself with a threatening face. Many disguise themselves as a souvenir, a tradition, a harmless gift. And it is precisely in familiarity that danger sets in. What remains in the room out of habit may be opening invisible gaps that compromise the spiritual environment. In the Old Testament, when the people of Israel took Jericho, God was clear in prohibiting them from bringing objects from the destroyed city. But Achan disobeyed. He hid gold, silver, and a Babylonian cloak in his tent, and this was enough for the entire people to suffer defeat. Joshua 7 reveals how a single forbidden object brought judgment on an entire community. This passage is not just about obedience, but about the spiritual influence that certain objects carry. What Achan kept seemed valuable, but it was contaminated. Likewise, there are things in the room that, although beautiful or expensive, carry memories, stories or symbols incompatible with the presence of God. Amulets, religious images outside the biblical context, pieces from other religions kept as decoration, all of these can be gateways to spiritual oppression. In 1 Corinthians 10 verse 21, Paul writes, "You cannot drink the cup of the Lord and the cup of demons." It is a warning about mixing what is holy with what is profane. There are also objects that carry unresolved emotional charges. Gifts from past relationships, letters, photos, clothes from people who left deep marks, all of these can act as anchors, preventing complete healing of the soul. Isaiah 43 verse 18 echoes again, "Do not remember the former things." It is not a question of impulsively throwing everything away, but of examining it with spiritual discernment. The Apostle John advises, "Beloved, do not believe every spirit, but test the spirits whether they are of God." 1 John 4 verse 1. This discernment also applies to what is allowed in the most intimate space of the house. The spiritual atmosphere of a place directly influences the emotional and mental state of those who live there. If the room is full of elements that generate restlessness, fear, painful nostalgia or disguised sensuality, it is natural that the soul does not find true rest. The Bible speaks of peace as a fruit of the Spirit, Galatians 5 verse 22. This peace is not just a feeling, but a spiritual state that manifests itself when the environment is clean, consecrated and aligned with kingdom principles. And the opposite is also true, when there is spiritual disorder, peace disappears. King Josiah, upon assuming the throne, ordered the purification of the temple. He ordered the removal of all pagan utensils and the destruction of altars to foreign gods. 2 Kings 23 reports this radical zeal for holiness. The result was a national revival. The principle remains, removing the unclean attracts the presence of God. This applies not only to the temple in Jerusalem, but also to the space where people sleep, think, pray and dream. The bedroom can become consecrated or contaminated spiritual territory, depending on what is allowed to remain there. The choice is daily and requires courage. The eyes are doors to the soul, and what we see in the environment directly influences our thoughts. Images, paintings, books or even decorative phrases may be sowing ideas that are contrary to faith, purity or God's purpose. Colossians 3 verse 2 is blunt, "Set your mind on things above, not on things on the earth." There are also songs, perfumes or objects with hidden meanings that, even without conscious intention, open doors into the spiritual world. The enemy is cunning and takes advantage of every loophole. Ephesians 4 verse 27 warns, "Do not give place to the devil." This includes the environment where you rest. It's not superstition, it's a spiritual principle. The consecration of a space requires attention to detail. Just as the tabernacle needed to be clean and organized before receiving God's glory, Exodus 40 verse 34, the room also needs to be prepared to be a place of communion. The problem is not just what is in the environment, but what is missing. Many rooms lack the presence of the Word. Visible verses, uplifting books, worship music, all contribute to transforming physical space into fertile soil for faith. Faith is not fed only with prayer, but with coherence between what we believe and the environment we build. A consecrated room is not synonymous with perfection, but with intention. It is a space where the presence of God is desired above any temporary comfort. The anxiety that so many face can be rooted in seemingly simple choices. Thrown clothes, accumulated papers, furniture out of order, all of this creates visual chaos. And where there is disorder, it is difficult for the spirit to find rest. God is a God of order. 1 Corinthians 14 verse 33 states, "For God is not a God of confusion, but of peace." There are those who ignore the impact of the physical environment on spiritual life. But the Bible shows that even the details of the tabernacle's construction were meticulously planned. Exodus 26 provides exact measurements, specific fabrics, precise instructions. This reveals that the worship space is not something trivial. The bedroom is a reflection of the heart. If there is constant clutter, perhaps there are accumulated emotions and misaligned priorities. In Proverbs 4 verse 23, there is the warning, "Above all that should be guarded, guard your heart, for from it come the sources of life." And the heart often reveals itself in the space that houses it. In addition to the visual clutter, there is an excess of sensory stimuli. Very intense colors, aggressive lighting, uninterrupted sounds, all of this affects emotional balance. The Bible values a peaceful environment. In 1 Peter 3 verse 4, "The gentle and quiet spirit, which is precious in the sight of God, is exalted." Sounds also influence. Music, even in the background, can carry messages contrary to the gospel. Lyrics that exalt the ego, pleasure, or violence contaminate the environment. In Romans 12 verse 2, Paul cries, "Do not be conformed to this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind." This renewal also begins with what we hear. There are homes where the bedroom has become an office, an entertainment room and a storage room for worries. Computers, calendars, tasks, all of these occupy space that should be sacred. Jesus said, "Each day is sufficient for its evil," Matthew 6 verse 34. Taking problems to their resting place is ignoring this principle. The bedroom needs to recover its original function, rest and renewal. But more than that, it needs to become a place of encounter with God. Just as Jesus sought silence and solitude to pray, we must also value this moment of reflection with purpose. For many, their cell phone is the last thing they see before going to sleep and the first thing they see when they wake up. This conditions the mind to immediacy, comparison, and excess information. The Bible says, "Be still, and know that I am God," Psalm 46 verse 10. But it is impossible to hear God with ears saturated with noise. Even insomnia can have spiritual roots. When the spirit is restless, the body finds no rest. The solution, often, is not in teas or medicines, but in cleaning the environment and restoring communion with the Lord of rest. Psalm 127 verse 2 declares, "It is useless to rise early and go to bed late, for the Lord gives to his beloved while they sleep." Holiness is not a distant concept, reserved for temples. It's a lifestyle that starts at home. And the bedroom, as it is the most intimate place, must be the first to be sanctified. In Leviticus 11 verse 45, God says, "Be holy, for I am holy." Re-evaluating the room is not a matter of aesthetics, but of obedience. When we understand that everything we have should glorify God, even the way we make our bed begins to have meaning. Colossians 3 verse 17 advises, "And whatever you do, do it in the name of the Lord Jesus." Maybe it's time to do some cleaning. Not just dusting the furniture, but examining each object with spiritual eyes. Ask, does this bring me closer or further away from God? It's a simple exercise, but it can generate profound transformations. The presence of God does not dwell where it is not welcome. When there is distraction, disorder or contamination, spiritual sensitivity decreases. But when the environment is purified, he manifests himself. It was like this in 2 Chronicles 5 verses 13 to 14, when, after the praise, the glory of the Lord filled the temple. This glory can also live in the simplest room, as long as it is consecrated. It is not the size, luxury, or decoration that attracts God, but the heart that desires his presence. He dwells where he is desired and revered. A consecrated room is not a magical place, but a territory of faith. It is there that dreams are sown, prayers are said in silence, and the spirit finds true rest. When this space is sanctified, it becomes not just a room, but a living altar. The sanctity of the room is not only built by removing what contaminates, but also by cultivating what edifies. Just as Joshua declared, "As for me and my house, we will serve the Lord," Joshua 24 verse 15, this decision must encompass every room, every detail, every choice made within the home, especially in the place where one rests and seeks renewal. There is power in what is exposed to the eyes. Bible verses on chalkboards, words of faith pinned to the walls, soft worship music filling the room. All of this creates a space where the mind finds relief and the spirit is elevated. In Deuteronomy 6 verses 6 to 9, the Lord instructs his people to place his words on the doorposts and on the walls of their houses. It is not about creating an artificially religious scenario, but about transforming the environment into an extension of faith. A place where the heart feels free to pray, read, listen to God. Where silence does not bother, but comforts. Where the divine presence is felt, even without words. The bedroom can also be a fertile field for spiritual revelations. In the Bible, God spoke of dreams and visions frequently. It was in rest that Solomon received wisdom, 1 Kings 3 verses 5 to 12, that Joseph was instructed to protect Mary and the baby Jesus, Matthew 2 verse 13, and that Daniel received profound visions, Daniel 7 verse 1. But for these revelations to occur, a spiritually healthy environment is necessary. God does not cast his pearls amid noise, disorder, or contamination. He speaks to the quiet heart, in the prepared environment, in the space sanctified by faith and zeal. Many Christians want to hear God's voice, but they don't realize that they are surrounded by elements that drown out that voice. Distraction is not just noise, it can come disguised as excess information, unresolved memories, sensory stimuli that do not allow the soul to collect itself. Faith needs space to flourish. And this space begins in the physical, but reaches the interior. Jesus taught, "Go into your room, close the door, and pray to your Father in secret," Matthew 6 verse 6. This instruction reveals a separate, intimate place, free from outside eyes and voices, where the connection with God is pure. The consecrated room becomes an altar, even without incense, candles or rituals. Because it is the heart that transforms the environment. When a sincere desire to please God governs the choices made in that space, the result is peace, discernment, and increased spiritual sensitivity. It is in this space that many silent battles are won. Confused thoughts, constant temptations, anxiety, fear, all of these are resisted when the environment is aligned with the presence of God. Spiritual warfare, as described in Ephesians 6 verse 12, often takes place there, behind closed doors. And to win these battles, it takes more than occasional prayer. It is necessary to monitor. Evaluate not only the content of the prayers, but also the content of the bookshelf, the wall, the playlist. A clean environment strengthens spiritual resistance. A polluted environment weakens discernment. Therefore, maintenance is continuous. It's not enough to clean the room once and expect the atmosphere to remain unshakable. Just as the temple was constantly purified, the room also needs regular revisions, physical and spiritual. As David wrote, "Examine me, O Lord, and try me, search my reins and my heart," Psalm 26 verse 2. The presence of God is not only manifested in the church. She wants to live in homes, rooms, routines. When the Spirit finds space, He transforms the ordinary into the sacred. Not with mysticism, but with truth. Because where He is welcome, there is freedom, 2 Corinthians 3 verse 17. This transformation begins with a decision, to no longer tolerate what grieves the Holy Spirit. This may require letting go of cherished objects, changes in the use of time, even momentary discomfort. But the reward is the peace that surpasses all understanding, Philippians 4 verse 7, dwelling where there was once unrest. Consecrating the room is an act of faith. It's declaring, Lord, this space is yours. Talk to me here. Guide me here. Comfort me here. And he responds. Not with shows, but with presence. Because peace doesn't scream, it comes in when the environment is in order, when the altar is ready. And at the end of a busy day, it is in this consecrated place that the soul finds shelter. Not in beautiful walls, but in the certainty that that space was set aside for communion with the Father. There, in silence, in the early hours or before dawn, he speaks, heals, renews. A consecrated room is more than a clean or quiet environment. It is a spiritual territory where peace does not depend on circumstances and where the soul finds refuge. It is in this space, separated from the noise of the world, that sincere prayers, true regrets and decisions that change destinies are born. When the heart and environment are aligned with God's will, even physical rest is transformed into spiritual renewal. The sanctification of intimate space is also an act of war. In times where distraction, fear and anxiety have occupied every corner of the mind, consecrating the room is positioning oneself in resistance against everything that tries to keep man away from the presence of God. It is to erect an invisible altar that says, "Here, only those who build enter. Here, only those who glorify the Lord remain." This positioning closes doors to chaos and opens space for God's dreams to manifest. Whoever dwells in the secret place of the Most High, says Psalm 91, will rest in the shadow of the Almighty. The room, when given to the Lord, becomes that hiding place. A place where the body rests, but the spirit is strengthened. Where the night is not marked by fear, but by presence. And where silence stops being empty and becomes sacred. This is the power of a consecrated space, transforming the ordinary into the eternal.